Interest rates in the Portland metro area and across the country hopefully have hit their peak again. The inventory of available homes in the Portland metro area hopefully found its bottom, and we got a foot of snow. I'm Ron Milligan with RE/MAX Select here in Portland's Pearl District. Although not coming to you from our offices in the Pearl District, I'm actually coming to you from my home office because of the aforementioned snow. Right now, Portland looks probably a little bit more like the snowy picture than this one over my other shoulder here. So as usual, I've got the latest statistics for the Portland metro area. That's Southwest Washington down to Portland Metro and all of the bedroom communities. And these are the weekly statistics, the sampling that we've been taking for several years now. First up is the inventory of available homes. That number has been falling and falling and falling regularly like clockwork for weeks and weeks and weeks, actually several months now, 3 or 4 months straight. And for the first time this last week, we actually saw an increase in the supply of active listings. It only increased by about 15 out of a total of like 3,200, went up to 3,215 homes. It's not a big rise, but it looks like we might have seen the bottom. This same thing happened last year, about 4 weeks earlier, where things leveled off and then they started to slowly rise as we entered our spring buying season. So I suspect that this is what we're seeing right now, and we're going to see that going forward. The number of new listings that hit the market this last week was up 20% versus the previous week, but the previous week that was a really low number. And what we're seeing right now for activity is still lower than what we saw last year at this time. Of course, keep in mind, last year at this time was a crazy market. And it's not a very good basis for comparison. So we'll just keep an eye on this number, and hopefully we'll start to see some more listings hitting the market as we enter our spring buying season. Buyer activity was down a little bit compared to the previous week, down by 11%. And by buyer activity or buyer demand, I'm talking about the number of new real estate purchase agreements that went under contract this last week. That was down, as I mentioned, to 516. That's lower than what we've been seeing in the previous weeks, probably the previous 4 to 5 weeks, where we've been in this kind of 525 to 575 range. So the number is down a little bit. I suspect what that has to do is it has to do with the higher interest rates. I mentioned earlier that we may have seen a peak. Not sure if that's the case yet, but it seems to have leveled off for over the last 5 or 6 days. Rates were at 6.375. And that's where they've been staying. I did see that this morning, one of the mortgage brokers at Wells Fargo did send me a rate sheet for this morning for the Portland metro area. It did actually show 5.25 as the note rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage. But with higher interest rates, I mean, rates right now are about an entire point higher than they were about 3-4 weeks ago. We hit a bottom of about 5.375 just for one day. But since then, you know, in the 3 weeks following, we've gone from 5.375 to 6.375, and that's a big jump for just 3 weeks. And I think that we're seeing the results of that in the number of new pending deals. It's pulled back on buyer demand, and it's probably going to be pretty similar. The number of new pending deals is probably going to be pretty similar going forward if rates stay at this rate. The average sale price did increase versus the previous week by 22%. We ended at $573,116. However, last year at this time, the increase in the average sale price exceeded what we saw this year. So if you remember the previous week, we were 0.5% higher this year than the average sale price for the same time last year. And with the numbers jumping up considerably last year, we're back into the red where we had been in the black for a couple of weeks. Not by much, by like 0.9%, by 0.5% higher this year versus last year over the last couple of weeks. Now we're back into the red by 3.1% this year compared to last year. The median sale price at the same time period did increase also slightly by 0.6% versus the previous week. And when we compare this week's number to last year at this time, it shows a decrease, again, in the red of 2.2% versus the median sale price last year at this time. And the last thing that I've been keeping my eye on are the numbers of foreclosures and pre-foreclosure homes, homes that are in distress. And that number is still pretty low. They increased slightly, both the foreclosure number up to 44 and the pre-foreclosure number I think was up 2. Those short sales were up by 2 versus the previous week, so not a huge change there. And then in the list that I've been getting from the title company showing the numbers of recorded notices of default this last week, the number was only around 10 for the metro area. So still a really low number. Keep in mind that these folks may be getting notices of default, but what could be the situation is they're in trouble right now, but they still have enough equity in their homes that they're not going to become a short sale or foreclosure. They may end up having to sell their home, which is extremely unfortunate, but it's better than what we saw in the Great Recession, where folks were both in distress and underwater, and they couldn't sell their homes without doing a foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure, or a short sale. So in this case, some of those folks could be in a situation where they could sell their home, have enough equity that they could pay off the bank, and then maybe walk away from the closing table with a bit of money in their pockets. I looked at the dates when these folks who did receive the notice of default, when they purchased their homes, and out of the 10, only 2 were recent, like within the last couple of years. Everything else I was seeing was from like 2017, 2015, or earlier. Even saw one that was from the 90s. So I suspect, unless these folks did some serious cash out refinancing, that they probably have some equity in their home, and they may be able to get out from underneath the house without a foreclosure and just do a traditional sale. So what do we expect going forward? I suspect next week all our numbers are going to be suppressed because of the snow. I went out and showed a home yesterday, Thursday afternoon, when the roads were starting to clear up a little bit. Spent the 40 minutes driving out to see the property, and my client got out on those icy roads and said, forget it, I'm not coming to see the house. So I suspect that there's been a lot of that going on, where listings that were supposed to hit the market aren't, and properties that might have gotten showings and a contract are not. So I suspect that what we're gonna see for the numbers of new listings and the numbers of new contracts, those numbers are gonna be really suppressed this next week. But I'll be here next week and I'll let you know. So thanks again for watching to the very end of the video. I totally appreciate that. And if you like the content, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't followed this channel, please follow. And of course, if you run into someone who might need this information or who might find this information helpful, please send it along to them. And then just keep in mind that all real estate is local. We've got lots of different markets out there, very diverse, and there's different dynamics in every single market. So if you're curious about what's going on in your neck of the woods, what the value of your home is right now, feel free to reach out to me. I am more than happy to share what I know and do some research for you. All right, we'll see you next week.